It was the spring of 1979. The air in Tensas Parish, Louisiana, was thick enough to drink, a humid cocktail of Mississippi River silt, last year's cotton stubble, and the sweet rot of the bottomlands. The world was turning a corner. Interest rates were climbing toward the sky. Farmers were borrowing deep, betting the farm on one more good year of soybeans, one more bumper crop of cotton. They were buying bigger tractors, bigger combines, bigger debts. Everything was about scale, getting bigger or getting out. That was the wisdom of the land, the catechism of the co-op, the gospel according to the bank in St. Joseph. In the cool, dim parish courthouse, a place that smelled of old paper and floor wax, that wisdom was being dispensed in parcels. It was the annual tax auction, a grim affair, a place of last resorts and quiet vulture capitalism. Farms lost to death, to debt, to drought. The auctioneer, a man named Silas Croft, with a voice like gravel in a coffee can, rattled off lot numbers and legal descriptions. Section 8, Township 11 North, Range 12 East. Prime alluvial soil, good for cotton. The bidding was muted but tense. Men in seed caps nodding, a flick of a finger. The price climbed. Another family's legacy turned into another man's asset. Then came parcel 734. Silas Croft cleared his throat, a sound of professional disinterest. 40 acres, more or less, situated in the Black River floodplain. The description was brief: unimproved, unfarmable, perennially inundated. A long silence settled over the room. A few men chuckled. One whispered to his neighbor. That was the old Miller tract. Been delinquent since the Depression. Worthless then, worthless now. The starting bid was set at the value of the back taxes owed. $40. $1 an acre. A pittance. A joke. A sum you might lose in a poker game and not remember the next morning. Silas Croft looked out over the room of sun-weathered faces. He saw no interest. He saw the smirks. He knew the land. A cypress swamp, a mosquito nursery, a snake pit. 40 acres of mud and misery. "Do I have a bid of $40? He asked, the question a formality. He was ready to strike it from the roll, to declare it unsold, to let the parish carry the dead weight for another year. A hand went up. It was not the hand of a farmer. It was not calloused and thick. It was the hand of a woman. Elara Jean Heston. She was 47 years old, a widow for just over a year. Her husband, Tom Heston, had been a good farmer, a man who understood the rhythm of cotton and the moods of the river. His heart had given out in the middle of planting season, leaving Elara with a paid-off homestead, a small savings account, and a profound silence. The men in the room turned. They looked at her. Elara, in her simple cotton dress, her face pale and her expression unreadable. They saw a woman adrift, a woman unmoored by grief. Silas Croft blinked, genuinely surprised. "The bid is $40 for Mr. Heston's widow," he announced, stumbling over the name. He looked around the room again. "Do I have 50? The question was met with laughter this time, soft but unmistakable. The idea of bidding against Elara Heston for 40 acres of swamp was absurd. It was like bidding for a case of malaria. No one raised a hand. No one nodded. Silas banged the gavel, a sharp, final crack in the quiet room. "Sold," he declared, a note of pity in his voice. "To Ilara Heston for $40. She paid in cash. 2 $20 bills, crisp and clean, drawn from an envelope in her purse. The parish clerk, a woman who had known Ilara her whole life, tried to catch her eye, to offer a word of something. Concern, condolence. But Ilara was focused on the transaction. She signed the deed. Her signature was firm, a series of decisive loops and lines. She folded the document, placed it in her purse, and walked out of the courthouse into the blinding Louisiana sun, leaving a room full of whispers behind her. The men of the parish had one word for it: grief. That was the only explanation that made sense. Grief made people do strange things. Tom was gone. The farm was leased out to a neighbor. She was alone in that big house. Of course, she was not thinking straight. Buying a swamp. It was a cry for help. It was a monument to poor judgment. At the feed store in Waterproof, the men leaned against sacks of fertilizer and shook their heads. A waste of good money. Even $40 was $40. That was 4 bags of seed. That was a new set of plowshares. At the Baptist church potluck, the women spoke in hushed tones. Poor Ilara. Her mind must be wandering. They resolved to take her more casseroles, to check in on her, to wrap her in the suffocating comfort of community concern. The banker in street, Joseph, Mr. Abernathy, heard the news and reviewed her accounts. The Hestons had been frugal. Tom had been a cautious man. The savings were modest but secure. This $40 purchase was insignificant financially, but it was a data point, an anomaly, a sign of potential instability. He made a small note in her file. He pictured her coming to him in a year, in 2 years, asking for a loan for some other foolish scheme born of loneliness and sorrow. He practiced the gentle, paternal tone he would use to deny her. The conventional wisdom was ironclad. It was the bedrock of their existence. Land had one purpose: to produce, to grow cotton, to grow soybeans, to grow corn. To do that, land needed to be flat. It needed to be drained. It needed to be workable. For generations, they had fought a war against the water. They built levees to hold back the river. They dug ditches to drain the fields. They installed pumps to lift the water away. Every acre reclaimed from the swamp was a victory, a triumph of human will over nature's chaos. And here was Ilara Heston, willingly, deliberately, buying the very thing they had spent their lives fighting. She was not just buying land, she was buying the enemy. The 40 acres she now owned was a testament to that enemy's resilience. It was a deep bowl of gumbo clay, a relic of an old oxbow lake the river had abandoned centuries ago. In the winter and spring, it was a shallow, muddy lake, studded with the knobby knees of bald cypress trees. In the summer, the water receded, leaving behind a stinking, cracked mud flat, buzzing with deer flies and mosquitoes. The timber was worthless. The cypress was gnarled and hollow. The tupelo gum was soft and pulpy. You could not drive a tractor on it. You could not walk across it without sinking to your knees in mud. It was 40 acres of primordial uselessness, a place on the map where profit went to die. Ilara did not explain herself. She did not have to. The community had already written her story. The grieving widow, the eccentric, the woman with more sorrow than sense. She accepted the casseroles with a quiet thank you. She nodded to the men at the feed store. She lived her life, a small, quiet island in a sea of assumptions. And she went to work. Her first trip to her new property was not with a surveyor or an engineer. It was with a pair of rubber boots, a hand-cranked soil auger, and a notebook. For weeks she walked the perimeter. She waded into the murky water. She felt the land not just with her feet, but with her hands. She drove the auger down, pulling up cores of black anaerobic mud. She smelled them. She crumbled them between her fingers, feeling the texture, the grit, the composition. She was not looking for fertility. She was looking for something else. History. In her notebook, she did not sketch drainage plans. She sketched maps. She drew the contours of the land, the placement of the ancient cypress trees, the flow of the water as it seeped in and out with the seasons. She spent evenings at the parish library, poring over old survey maps from the 1800s. She found what she was looking for, a map from 1842. It showed the Tensas River in a different course, a looping, winding bend that cut directly through the land now known as Parcel 734. A later map from 1890 showed the river had straightened its path, a common occurrence in the delta. It had cut a new channel, leaving its old bed behind. An orphan, an oxbow lake slowly filling with silt and sediment over the decades. The men of the parish saw a swamp. Elara saw a time capsule. Her work began in earnest that first autumn. It was not the work of a farmer. It was the work of a patient, meticulous archaeologist. She did not bring in bulldozers to clear the land. She brought in a brush axe and a pruning saw. She did not clear-cut. She selectively trimmed the undergrowth, the invasive water hyacinth, the tangled thickets of buttonbush. She was not clearing a field. She was clearing a path. She was creating access, not to the land itself, but to what lay beneath it. In the spring of 1980, she bought the mule, a creature as stubborn and misunderstood as her project. She named him Moses. Together they moved slowly, deliberately. She fashioned a small wooden sledge. Moses would pull it, laden with her tools, through the shallow water and mud. The sight of her, a lone woman leading a mule into the heart of a swamp, became a piece of local folklore. A cautionary tale told to children, a joke shared over beers. Elara's Folly, they called the property now. The name stuck. She spent that year and the next probing. She had a set of long, slender steel rods, threaded at the ends so they could be joined together. She had welded a simple T-handle to the top and a conical point to the bottom. Day after day, she would push the probe into the mud. She worked in a grid pattern, meticulous and slow. Most of the time, the rod slid down through feet of soft muck and hit the hard-pan clay below. But sometimes it stopped. It stopped with a solid, resonant thud, a sound that was not rock, a sound that was not clay. When she felt that thud, she would mark the spot with a long cane pole, its top flagged with a strip of red cloth. By the end of 1981, the swamp was dotted with these red flags. They looked like strange, alien flowers blooming in the stagnant water. They formed a pattern, a long, curving line, the ghost of the old river channel. The work was brutal. The Louisiana heat was a physical weight. The mosquitoes were a constant, whining torment. Snakes, thick as a man's arm, slid silently through the water. She wore long sleeves, a wide-brimmed hat, and a veil of netting over her face. She worked from dawn until the heat became unbearable, then again in the cooler hours of the late afternoon. She was lean and hard now, her skin tanned to the color of walnut, her hands strong and calloused. The softness of the grieving widow was gone, baked away by the sun, replaced by a core of quiet, unyielding purpose. She needed a way to dig, not with a shovel. The holes would fill with water and mud as fast as she could dig them. She needed something else. She went to the bank, to Mr. Abernathy. She asked for a loan of $5,000. It was a small sum. She had the homestead as collateral. She explained her purpose. "I need to purchase a winch and a small industrial pump," she said, her voice even and calm. Mr. Abernathy leaned back in his leather chair. He steepled his fingers. He gave her the gentle, paternal smile he had been practicing for 2 years. "Ilara," he began, his voice soft with condescension, "what exactly are you trying to accomplish out there in that swamp?" "I'm prospecting," she said. The word hung in the air. Prospecting. For what? Oil? Gas? The bank had financed plenty of wildcatters, but they drilled on high ground. They had geological surveys. They had leases and partners and heavy equipment. They did not work with a mule and a steel rod. "Prospecting for what, exactly?" he pressed. Ilara hesitated. She had a choice. She could tell him the truth, the whole fantastic story of the old river channel and what she believed lay preserved in the anaerobic mud. She could see the disbelief already forming in his eyes. She could hear the story being retold at the feed store, embellished and expanded, another chapter in the legend of the crazy widow. Or she could keep her secret. "For timber," she said, choosing a half-truth. The banker almost laughed. "Ilara, everyone knows that timber on that land is worthless. It's hollow, rotten cypress. Not the timber that's standing," she said. "The timber that's fallen." It was no use. The logic was too strange, too alien. He saw only risk. A woman with a strange obsession, wanting to throw good money after bad. The loan was denied. Politely, regretfully, but firmly. She left the bank, not with anger, but with resolve. She had known it was a long shot. The world ran on a certain kind of logic. Her logic was different. It was older. It was rooted in the land itself, not in the ledger books of a bank. She sold a small parcel of her husband's land, a 5-acre plot on the back road, good for a kitchen garden. She got $6,000 for it. The community saw it as another sign of her decline, selling off the good land to fund her obsession with the bad. With the money, she did not buy a new winch. She bought an old one from a shipyard auction in Morgan City, a rust-pocked beast from a decommissioned shrimp boat. She bought a used gasoline engine, a Briggs & Stratton that had once powered a water pump. She bought spools of steel cable, pulleys, and gears. In the old barn behind her house, she became a mechanic, a fabricator. She had her husband's old tools, a stick welder, an angle grinder, a drill press. She taught herself. She read manuals. She disassembled the winch, cleaned every gear, replaced every bearing. She mounted it and the engine onto a heavy steel frame she welded herself. She built a small, flat-bottomed boat, a bateau, not out of wood, but by welding sheets of steel together. It was ugly, it was heavy, but it was strong. She mounted her homemade winch onto the bow. By the summer of 1983, she was ready. She and Moses dragged the steel bateau to the edge of the swamp. They pushed it into the water. The engine coughed to life, a belch of blue smoke rising into the humid air. She navigated the strange boat through the cypress knees, following her line of red-flagged cane poles. She chose a spot in the middle of the curve. She dropped 2 heavy, homemade anchors. The work was slow, methodical. She used a long, powerful hose connected to a water pump. She jetted the mud away from the spot her probe had identified. It was like hydraulic mining in miniature. The water turned black with suspended silt as she forced the mud away, deeper and deeper. Hours turned into days, days turned into weeks. The engine droned on. The pump throbbed. She stood on the deck of her strange boat, wrestling the high-pressure hose, covered from head to toe in black mud. Then, the water jet hit something massive. The sound changed. A deep, solid thrumming echoed up the hose. She cut the engine. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the drip of water and the hum of insects. She took a long pole and probed the spot. She could feel it. A surface. Long, broad, gently curved. Wood. The next phase was the hardest. She had to get cables around it. She spent a week in the water, diving down into the blackness, feeling her way by touch alone. The water was cool, the mud at the bottom soft and forgiving. She worked a cable under one end, then the other. She fought against the suction of the mud, a force that had held this thing for centuries. Finally, the cables were secure. She connected them to the winch. She took a deep breath. She started the winch engine. The cable spooled in, groaning under the tension. The small steel boat creaked. The anchors dug into the mud. The cable grew taut as a guitar string. For a long moment, nothing happened. The engine strained. The winch whined in protest. Then she felt a shift. A deep geologic shudder that came up through the floor of the boat. The mud released its grip with a great sucking sigh. The water around the boat boiled with escaping gas. Slowly, ponderously, something broke the surface. It was not a log. It was a leviathan, a cylinder of wood so vast it seemed impossible. It rose from the water, black and slick. The water cascaded off its sides in sheets. It was a bald cypress log, 5 feet in diameter at its base, nearly 60 feet long. The surface was not rotten. It was perfectly preserved, sculpted by the slow currents of the old river. There were no branches, no bark, just a perfect ancient column of wood. She stared at it, her heart pounding. She had known. In her mind, in her research, she had known it was there. But to see it, to see the physical manifestation of her conviction, it was a moment of profound, terrifying vindication. She spent the next 6 months in secret. She managed to pull the great log into the shallower water near the edge of her property. It lay there, a sleeping giant, half submerged in the mud, hidden by the cypress trees. One log was not enough. She needed to prove it was not a fluke. She moved her boat. She found another and another. By the spring of 1984, she had located and partially unearthed 5 of these giants, all lying in a neat row along the bed of the forgotten river. The secret was getting too big to keep. The work was too much for one woman. She needed help, and she needed a buyer. She did not go to the local sawmills. They were equipped for pine and oak, for the small, second-growth timber of the modern age. They would not know what to do with a log of this size. They would not understand its value. She wrote a letter, not to a company in Louisiana, not even to a company in the South. She wrote to a specialty miller in Portland, Oregon, a company that dealt in rare and oversized wood. She included a photograph she had taken with an old Kodak camera. The photo showed the first log, massive and dark, with her mule, Moses, standing beside it for scale. She also included a core sample she had painstakingly drilled from the wood. 3 weeks later, a man arrived in Tensas Parish. He did not look like he belonged. He wore hiking boots and a clean flannel shirt. He drove a rental car. He asked for directions to Elara Heston's place. The men at the feed store gave him the directions, along with a warning. "She's a little peculiar," they said. "Got a swamp full of mud out back." The man's name was David Chen. He was a master luthier, a builder of fine guitars and violins, and he was a wood expert for the milling company. Elara met him at her gate. She did not say much. She just led him back to the edge of the swamp, to the place where the first log lay waiting. Chen stopped. He did not speak for a long time. He walked the length of the log. He ran his hands over its surface. He knelt and examined the core sample she had sent. He had a small, specialized tool for counting growth rings. "Do you know what this is?" he finally asked, his voice full of a reverence that bordered on awe. "It's a cypress log," Elara said simply. "No," Chen corrected her gently. "This is not just a cypress log. This is virgin cypress, old growth. Based on the ring density, this tree was a sapling when the Roman Empire was at its peak. It was over 1,000 years old when it fell into this river, probably during a hurricane in the 1700s. It's been perfectly preserved in this anaerobic mud ever since." He looked at her, his eyes searching her face. "This wood, it doesn't exist anymore. It was all logged out a century ago. It's called sinker cypress. The grain is so tight, so dense, you can barely see it. It's dimensionally stable. It's impervious to rot and insects. Luthiers, boat builders, furniture makers, they would kill for wood like this. This isn't timber, Mr. Heston's widow. This is treasure." He pulled out a calculator. He did some measurements. He punched in numbers. The price per board foot he was calculating was astronomical. It was a number that had no frame of reference in the world of cotton and soybeans. "We'll buy it," he said. "We'll buy all of them. We'll bring in our own equipment, a portable mill, a crane.